Welcome, Dr. James Beckett, Sports Card Insights, outtake episode from Dustin Cooley's Sports Card Dad interview of me. And when he got into the legacy issues, and I tried to explain the legacy of me as a person may or may not be the same as the legacy of my company that has my name, especially since it's almost exactly 20 years since I sold and I'm not in the chain of command. But thanks sponsors, Topps, Panini, Upper Deck, Heritage Auctions, Huggins Scott Auctions, Mike Stadium Sports Cards, Burbank Sports Cards, ComC.com, and Beckett Media, Beckett Grading, Beckett Authentication. So part of the longer interview with Dustin, which you should check out on his YouTube channel. So thanks, Dustin. Thanks, everybody. Here it is.
I'm here with the man, the myth, the legend. Dr. James Beckett is back on the show. The trading card hobby, does it need new innovation? Or do you think we just need maybe improvements on current offerings? Or, just the third part of the question, have we found hobby equilibrium where the needs for collectors, speculators, investors are all being met in different ways?
Yes, yes, and no. There's always room for more innovation. The hobby needs to be exciting. It can't be static. It's got to be dynamic. Even when we get to the situation with Fanatics being such a dominant player, there's still going to be a lot of innovation in there. But Panini, Upper Deck, Leaf even, there needs to be innovation, and there will be innovation. As far as equilibrium, no. I have a friend that gives a speech, a really sharp CEO, and he has a talk he gives about the difference in balance and priorities. He said, if you do your priorities right, you'll achieve balance occasionally. But if you shoot for balance, you're going to be watered down. You're going to be fractionalized. You're going to be double-minded. Concentrate on something, go for it, enjoy it. Balance is just ethereal. It's rarely achieved. And it's not a goal that I have. My goal is to have a hobby that is exciting and fruitful and fun for buyers and sellers. And so breakers are sellers. The grading companies, they're helping people buy or sell. The price guides helping people buy and sell. And that's the equilibrium I want. I want a fair playing field for collectors and dealers. That means in the modern world, there needs to be some evaluation of who the best content creators are out there. There's content creators that are overly self-serving. I hope the collecting public figures that out based on how things play out. The vast majority of them, I think, are really trying to be helpful, and I'm hoping they do well. And the ones that are just hyping things for their own personal benefit, I hope that's exposed. And I think it frequently is.
Going back to the 80s, you were my content creator. I can remember it was like the spring of 1990, and I was 9 years old. I didn't know there was going to be a Beckett basketball magazine and a Beckett football magazine. I, of course, had the Beckett baseball magazine, and I flipped out as a 10-year-old, just like a lot of other folks around my age did. But those articles, I was reading it cover to cover. You were the pre-internet content creator. I know there's other content creators. I'm not saying you were the only one, but you were one of the big influencers back in the day. Does it blow your mind now that you have all the access to different opinions, to different publications? Is it good, bad? Is it all of these things?
It depends on how people interpret it, because back in the day, I had a great team working with me, and we did a lot of long form stuff. So our price guides were voluminous and were expansive, and the articles were longer. We didn't have these sound bites as much. We weren't hyping or promoting. We were just trying to put out a quality magazine each month. Now, journalism is more short form, and Twitter expressing yourself very quickly and emojis and all that. You're in a situation where everything is so fast. The digital trumps the analog by being so fast. And so a monthly magazine is too slow. I understand that. But that allowed for some rhythm of the industry to have a monthly show calendar and for people to think about where am I going. Now it's more instantaneous. It's not bad. It's just the way it is now. But still needs to be some evaluation of what are the trusted sources. We were a trusted source at the time, and there are trusted sources now. And if people work toward that, then that's healthy.
Yeah, I mean, you're right. The digital world, the barrier to entry is zero. If you think back to when you were making a magazine, you were running a business to create the magazine. You had to actually hire people. We have our iPhone. We put it on our little tripod, turn it on and talk. That we're all publishers. Right. And I think it was Elon Musk on Twitter. He said, you are the media. And that's essentially what it is, for better or worse. And I understand what you mean. Because we're all media doesn't mean we're all journalists, doesn't mean we all know what we're talking about, doesn't mean that it's all good.
But nowadays, you need to be clever. That helps. Being able to emote and promote is good. But people always ask me back in even the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, well, what if somebody just came up and had a price guide and all the prices were higher? They just took your price guide and ripped you off a little bit, but everything was higher. And then the dealers would like that better. And I said, I really don't think they would like it better if it's not accurate. Accuracy was our only defense. Fast forward to 2025 now. What is accuracy? Accuracy is like equilibrium, balance, instant accuracy. It might have been accurate yesterday, but it might not be accurate today based on new comps or the latest thing or an injury or something like that. So things happen really fast. And if it's honest at the time, then it's just like comps. This is an accurate comp for 4 months ago. What does that mean for today? Has there been anything since? If not, you're going to try to evaluate the market of whether things have generally gone up or down. Dustin, simpler days. It was really hard to put out the magazines, but once the magazine was out, we had a high degree of acceptance, and it put everybody reading off the same sheet music and allowed for orderly transactions. Now it's a little bit of the Wild West. And there's real opportunity for people that know how to read the crowd, read the tea leaves, and to see the future. My specialty is talking about the present and the past. The future is uncertain forever.
Absolutely. It's tricky because if you go back in time, and I was probably too young to even remember if we're just talking about mainstream news, because we're talking about hobby news. There's a lot of folks that do hobby news. I'm one of them that does some of the hobby news type stuff. I try to do it in an entertaining way with Alf in the background and that sort of thing. It shifted over to where it used to be somebody was just telling you, hey, there was a car accident today and 3 people were injured or whatever. Now it's all opinion based. If you turn on CNN or Fox or MSNBC or wherever you go, it's always someone's take on the news. And I feel like that's something that as a society, again, for better or worse, and it's in our hobby as well, where there'll be some sort of a news item and everyone's going to chime in on that particular news. I like to listen to everybody's opinion on it.
But if you listen long enough to some of these sources, you'll realize just like CNN has a certain perspective, a certain worldview. Fox has something different. MSNBC, all of these, you've listened to them enough. You've seen, it's not just the video, the way they clipped the video, the way they edited it, the way they presented it. You get an idea of where they're coming from. The same thing's going to happen in the hobby. There won't be a network, but there'll be some understanding that these guys are understated. You look at Chris Sewell. He's built a great following. He comes across as a regular guy, straight shooter. Just telling you like it is. He's not hyping things. But then other people have their own shtick, and that's not bad. But ultimately, when you get to where's the beef, there has to be something of value in every one of these programs. And it could be sizzle, it could be entertainment, it could be information, it could be encouragement. There's lots of things, but it needs to be honest, to be done with integrity. Otherwise, I think they'll get exposed. There are some content creators who have gotten in trouble. They're out there publicly. I don't want to restate some of the things that have happened recently as well as a while back. It's just that you have a level of public trust, Dustin, and so do I. And so we don't want to betray that. We have people listening to us because they think we have words and pictures or we have something of value that they're going to spend their time on.
Absolutely. There's been a big shift. There's a lot of nostalgia for 90s inserts and 90s cards. Whether they're expensive ones or not, it doesn't really matter. There's people that are just really focused in, and I'm a kid of the 80s, 90s, so I completely get it. What do you say when people say, oh, the manufacturers, they're lazy now, they're not making inserts the way they used to, they've got a card, they make a parallel of 40 different colors, and they're not putting enough effort into creating the great inserts or whatever the tech used in the 90s. Do you think that's a fair statement? And if we go back in time, you had Pinnacle, you had Score, you had Action Pack, you had a variety of different companies competing. Which environment do you like better? Less companies with more exclusives that maybe have a little bit of a tighter rein? I would assume if you're running Beckett Magazine, it would be a lot easier if you had Panini Tops or like a couple of companies as opposed to 20 that are making trading cards. I know I just asked you 5 questions in one question. What's your take on manufacturing?
First of all, you're glamorizing the 90s. And really, it isn't all the 90s. It's really the late 90s or the mid-late 90s, the early 90s, before the baseball strike in 94, 95, around in there. It was mostly junk wax except for Finest and SP. There were some things going on there that were good, but a lot of that early 90s stuff was not good. The late 90s is the golden age of inserts, but that was then. And companies just beat the dead horse and keep coming out with the same thing and retreading designs. Of course, they're going to do that. And they're going to do that until the dealers or the collectors, one or both, just say no. They just say, we've seen this. This is boring to us now. They're not boring some of those great classic designs that were innovative at the time and still look interesting. But you will note, Dustin, that most of those companies that did those amazing inserts are out of business. They went defunct. So what collectors and dealers want is they want card manufacturers to be nonprofits. They want them to not make any money. They want them to give such a good deal that they make the money and the card companies maybe break even. And in those days, like I said, they spent a lot of money on their product. The easiest, the highest profit for these companies is a product that doesn't have the attributes, doesn't have game use, doesn't have autographs, doesn't even have these super elaborate inserts, but just has parallels.
To your point, it sells out.
It does for now, but it may not. There may be a backlash, but there's never been an effective consumer boycott of cards, no matter how bad they are, because the reverse psychology is if nobody gets it, it'll be scarce, and then it'll be valuable. So if people pan it, it might come into vogue because nobody liked it and it's scarce. It's twisted.
It's a catch-22 no matter how you slice it. Yeah, it's like collectors / speculators, they want it all the time. There's no winning problem.
But my point is to wait on collectors to just say no is not going to happen. They are going to start making choices of saying, you know what, I'm not leaving the hobby, but I'm going to buy less. Or instead of buying that, I'm going to buy this other stuff that I think is a better deal or it's a better value proposition for me. It's less per box or per case. And I feel like over time, that's going to be better for me. Then the manufacturers will get the message. They don't want tired designs. And yet the most tired design is Topps flagship. It's very similar each year and it sells as much as anything. So collectors are saying with their dollars is we want the current year athletes and we want an interesting product and we want something that has continuity. So Topps is going to keep doing it. They're not going to try something drastic. In fact, Topps through Fanatics, they have really innovated with some of their Topps now and some of these things that they've done. It's too much lottery to me, too much gambling, but it sure has gotten some excitement.
There's no denying that. There's more participants in the hobby today than probably ever. But that says a lot when you come off the boom of 2020, 2021. A lot of speculation money flies in and then it flies out. And there's this assumption that was maybe a fly-by-night kind of boom, but not necessarily true when you're looking at the money that's still being spent. It's just being spent differently and probably more smartly, but there's still just a ton of new participants coming in. How do you want to be remembered in the card hobby in the future? What is the Beckett legacy in your mind?
In keeping with your compound questioning, basically there's two ways to answer that. There's me as a person and me as a founder of a company that's been an enduring brand that is really not hitting on all cylinders now. My legacy is inextricably linked between my personal legacy and the company legacy. I hope not, because I'm a person. When people joke about the man, the myth, the legend, I am a man and I'm not a myth and I'm not a legend because I'm still alive. But the company has taken on mythology. It has gone from a very lofty perch to some disrespect when really there's hardworking people there that have really paid their dues. And the corporate structure, which is now being fixed, was not allowing them to do their best. So I hope my legacy, because I think it'll always be somewhat tied to the company, I think 2025 is going to be a good year for the company. That's not good for me financially, but it's good for the hobby. It's good for the hobby that all the brands do well. But if you look back and now as it's being put together, you can see that there were things going on outside the control of my company, certainly outside my control. I'm not in the chain of command, but things that were going on that were external. And if we could just get back to the collectors, which I think is the intention now, especially in 2025, then I'm very optimistic. And does that reflect well on me? I'm sure it does. Does it reflect poorly on me? If the company I founded does poorly, it probably does. I won't say it's my fault necessarily, but everybody that starts a company wants that company to endure and be successful and breathe. You can't just rest on your laurels. You've got to keep innovating. But there was a long period where my old company lost its innovation edge. And we never lost that when I was there because that was a big part of my ethos. And that's why when we did BGS, I was determined not to do a Me Too grading service, that we were going to innovate in some ways, not to keep PSA on their toes, but just to provide an alternative to PSA. They've done great. And the reason they've done great is because they haven't been worried about what we were doing as much as they took care of business. Others out there, when they were competing with us on the price guide, they would try to think they're doing this, so we'll do this. No, PSA has had their own approach. They've stuck to it. They've doubled down on their winners, and they've done great. My hat's off to them. It's weird to go to a show, Dustin, and hear your name. And it used to be I heard my name in a very positive context. Now it's my name, not always in a positive context. So I want to help make it better.
Man, myth, legend. You said, hey, I'm a man. I also have this separate identity for my company. I'm curious, does your wife, do your kids pay attention to all of this industry stuff as well? Because their name's on it too. Or they can, that's dad's old company.
This is coming from the sports car dad himself. Do your kids think you're a legend? I don't think so. So the focus is on the man. You're a loving father. That's great. And what you do when you go to work, which I'm retired now, so I'm around more. I'm able to do grandkids stuff. So that's been great. When I sold my company, which has been almost 20 years now, I got my life back. I did not have good balance. I had priorities. I was present with my family and did stuff, but I worked a lot and I loved it. But I have more time to have better balance. I don't have perfect balance, but if somebody needs me for something, I could break away a lot more easily because I don't have price guide deadlines.
Yeah, I can only imagine that sort of pressure.
There are dads out there, Dustin, they're a myth. They're a myth to their own kids. They have a great reputation, but they're not there. I never wanted to be a dad like that. I'm not.
Yeah, no, absolutely. 100%.